Hello and welcome to the Inner Courts of the Beautiful. We've been looking at the various manifestations of the sun, the manifestations of Surya as the various Adityas. Today's Aditya is Parjánya. Parjánya is the Aditya that we see when sun enters the sign of Scorpio, which is the natural 8th house, the sign of the zodiac, and usually happens sometimes between mid-November going all the way up to mid-December. Parjánya is one of those ancient Vedic deities, and Parjánya is a very mysterious deity even. Parjánya is responsible for transformations, and these transformations lead to enlightenment. So he is also the giver of all the secret knowledge that leads to spiritual enlightenment. Parjánya is also depicted as the rain bull. He is the one who rides the rain clouds and pushes the clouds to give us rain copiously, and he is also the god who fertilizes the soil so that we have an abundance of crop and fruit. Parjánya is the one who is responsible for illumining our inner selves. The reason illumining our inner selves becomes so important is that when the deepest corners of our inner being are illumined, there is nothing that is secret from within ourselves anymore. And when the darkest corners within our own inner selves are illumined, everything becomes very clear. And when everything is illumined, and when everything is clear, and when your perception is complete and perfect, then enlightenment is the end outcome. And hence Parjánya is the one who gifts us with the blessing of enlightenment. So in order to do and illumine our inner selves, he brings that by transformations. He is transforming your original state into the new state of enlightenment. And such transformations which deliver you to truth is like being put through the test of fire, because fire is the one that purifies gold, and fire is the one that purifies your perception to give you the experience and give you the perception of truth. So Parjánya, in order to illumine you, puts you through the transformation, and hence is also symbolized by the lighting of the lamp. The natural 8th house of Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Agni Tattva Graha, Agni Tattva being the fire element, and hence Parjánya is offered ghee lamps. And Scorpio being the month of Kartika in the Indian tradition, the lunar cycle, the month of Kartika, the Paurnami or the full moon of Kartika, is celebrated by lighting lamps. The lighting of lamp is essentially for the Aditya of Parjánya, and what it symbolizes is the beginning or the triggering of spiritual transformation within ourselves to lead us to being enlightened beings. Parjánya takes us through this journey of transformation, and through the transformation, through the process of transformation, one also attains various spiritual accomplishments or siddhis. So Parjanya hence is the one who grants one siddhis, spiritual accomplishments. And the one who has all of these spiritual accomplishments or siddhis is called a siddha. In the South Indian tradition, in Tamil Nadu for instance, there's a whole very deep and long tradition of siddhars. So the siddhar is born out of this process of transformation. If you take the story of every single siddhar, the story basically talks about how the siddhar was transformed from being in a very ordinary human state to becoming eventually a very accomplished spiritual being. Now, this whole spiritual progress and transformation is a blessing of Parjanya. Hence, from the point of view of Jyotisha or astrology, usually when one has to see if the person is blessed enough to have siddhis in his or her lifetime, you see the connection between the ascendant, the Lagna Lord, the 8th house, the natural 8th being Scorpio, which is Parjanya's area of play, and hence the 8th house connecting with Sun, the soul, and the Atmakaraka. So when there is a connection between the Lagna, the 8th house, the Sun, and the Atmakaraka, one can be reasonably sure that such a person has the blessings of being given siddhis. Now also, it points us to another thing. If someone has to have a blessing, it comes because of one's purva punya, one's past lives' blessings, the good deeds committed by the soul in the past life. Hence, this is another important association, the connection with the past life. And that is where the blessings of the Guru also comes in. But it does not come easy, because Parjanya is the one, like I was mentioning, puts you through the crucible of fire. He tests your faith. He tests your faith in both the Vidya, the knowledge itself, and he also tests your faith in the Guru or the mentor who teaches you. So when Parjanya works on you, he tests you and sees how consistently you follow the path of both the Vidya, the knowledge, how much you have conviction in that knowledge, and how much you have faith and conviction in your own mentor or Guru. So that is again a play of Parjanya. The other very important thing, because the Guru comes into play, is also the blessings of being taught by a tradition of knowledgeable gurus or teachers. The natural 4th or the 4th house is the house of learning, is a seat of learning. And the 8th house from the 4th is the knowledge or the learning of the secret traditions. Hence, the 8th from the 4th becomes the 11th house. So 11th house hence gives you the blessings of learning from a parampara of gurus or a parampara of spiritual mentors. If one was to become part of being accepted as part of a parampara and be taught all the secret traditions and secret practices, you can be very sure it's the blessings of Parjanya again, and hence he connects you to the Guru and you get secret knowledge and it helps you transformation, and eventually, and if you have the blessings and you have the faith and consistency, you could also eventually have the blessings of being enlightened. Parjanya governs the movement of Vayu, and it is through the movement of Vayu that one has access to prana, and prana is the life force that keeps us alive. And hence, Parjanya is the one who really gives us the blessing of longevity and the span of life that we eventually enjoy in our lifetimes. Now, when we talk about Vayu and the span of longevity that we enjoy in our lifetimes, then we also have to talk about Saturn or Shani. Shani is a Vayu Graha, and Shani is the one who consumes the Vayu. And hence, Shani along with Rahu the two Vayu Grahas, they are the ones responsible for setting into play the process of entropy, which is any being that is born from the moment of its creation moves towards its end. But the rate of decay is basically governed by Shani and Rahu. Shani primarily because he is the one who consumes this Vayu. So, we also now have an insight into something very subtle here in terms of the nature of longevity, or the secret to living a very long life. And that secret is about our longevities not being measured by units of time, but really our longevities, the currency of longevity, being the number of breaths that one takes in one's lifetime. Now, this is a secret that the Siddhas knew, and they honed it through secret yogic techniques. And through these yogic techniques, what they did was they could reduce the number of breaths over spans of time and commensurately increase their lifespans. And hence, we see in the Siddha tradition, many of the Siddhas having very, very long lives. For instance, Tirumular, who is called the Prince of Siddhas, Tirumular is supposed to have had a lifetime spanning 3,000 years. And Gorakhnath, another Siddhar, he is supposed to have had a lifetime or a lifespan of 800 years. Now, this is essentially really knowing the secret, which again, the secret spiritual technique being the blessing of Parjánya, and also longevity being a blessing of Parjánya. It would be a good time to look at a couple of case studies to better understand how Parjánya blesses us in our lives. Let's take the case of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is probably one of the foremost martial artists of our times, a very influential one certainly. And he was also an artist, he was a director, he was also a poet. And of course, one of his very important contributions was the martial art form of Jeet Kune Do. Jeet Kune Do literally means the way of the intercepting fist. It was a composite of the various martial art forms that he had learned and put together. And in some ways, it is a forerunner to what we today call as the mixed martial arts. So clearly, a very significant influence that has persisted to the day. However, like I was telling, Parjánya has a very important influence in Bruce Lee's life. And one of the very first things was Parjanya's quality of testing a person's faith and putting him through the crucible to know whether someone is going to persist with their faith in their teacher and also persist with their faith with the knowledge or the art form that they seek to have and seek to learn. When Bruce Lee was very young, he went to the Grandmaster of Wing Chun, one of the martial art forms, whose name was Ip Man. So Ip Man was a very sought after Grandmaster, and he didn't really take in students easily. But when he did accept, still there was a lot of very challenges that he had to encounter. The reason being, Bruce Lee was 1/4 German from his mother's side, and these were secret art forms or martial art forms that were not taught to non-Asians. So there was a lot of resistance. None of Ip Man's students trained or practiced with him, so he was not accepted easily. But he persisted, and eventually he was one of the 5 or 6 students to have directly been taught by Ip Man. And of course, Bruce Lee went on to prove his teacher's faith in his student as well when he went to master it, and he brought laurels to Ip Man as well. There's another thing in terms of Parjanya's blessings, which is the blessings of understanding of very subtle secrets in the understanding of the occult. Bruce Lee was heavily influenced by Taoism, Buddhism, and also the philosophy of J. Krishnamurti. And he is supposed to have reflected on things like, for instance, he said that one should not even by a mistake, talk ill of oneself, because the body would not understand the intent of what words are. So one should be very careful with the words one uses, even upon oneself, because the way he understood, he said that words are basically spellings, and spellings are like spells being cast on oneself. So by speaking kind words on ourselves, one can even change the quality of our own lives, and by choosing not to do that, we choose the alternative of not having a good life. So these kind of thoughts, where you're trying to understand the subtle secrets of how nature works, of life works, is something that always fascinated him. And of course, in terms of the ends, the longevity, the mysteriousness and secrets, that was also there in Bruce Lee's life. Bruce Lee's end was quite mysterious. No one quite knew the exact reason why he died. The official reason given by the doctors was a result of a misadventure, but really speaking, he's supposed to have had some cerebral edema, but nevertheless there was no external injuries, and his life ended when he was still 32. So you see Parjánya having a very strong hold on Bruce Lee's life. We have another very interesting personality who has a very significant influence of Parjánya in her life. None other than Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi being the very first and till date the only woman Prime Minister of India. She clearly had a lot of influence in the world stage. She was voted as the Woman of the Millennium in one of the BBC polls in 1999. Now, in terms of Parjanya's influence, she has Sun in Scorpio. We can see Parjanya's telltale hand in creating transformations, upheavals, radical and dramatic reversals being there in her life. Some that she initiated or instigated, and some she was at the receiving end of. Now, in terms of the transformations, the dramatic upheavals that happened, the very first one would be 1971. 1971, Indira Gandhi, as the Prime Minister of India, decided to wage a war with Pakistan, went to war with Pakistan to liberate what was then East Pakistan. India won the war, and Bangladesh was created, and with that, India's position as a regional superpower, and certainly the leading power in South Asia, was pretty much sealed, and since then it's grown on those lines. In 1975, she also took a call, which perhaps was also dubious. History says that in 1975 to 1977, she cited, a secessionist tendency across the country and calls for revolution in different parts of the country, and hence she instituted an emergency and cut down and curtail the freedom of various institutions and people, and that was a misadventure that ended in 1977. Nevertheless, that upheaval, the transformation, was initiated by Indira Gandhi. So here we can see this quality of Parjanya coming into play. And there was another one in 1984 when again separatist forces in Punjab, the Khalistan movement, you had a lot of Khalistanis taking over the Golden Temple in Amritsar and operating out of the Golden Temple, and she decided to conduct the Operation Blue Star, which was basically taking on the separatists inside the Golden Temple, which was considered sacrilegious by the Sikh community, or at least some of the Sikh community, and she eventually paid a price, and that price was the way Parjanya creates dramatic, mysterious and secretive ends. In this case, some of the separatists, in a sense, that her own bodyguards who had sympathies with the Khalistani movement, assassinated her. So we see here Parjanya's telltale signs in all the significant events in Indira Gandhi's life. Let's bring the proceedings to a close with a very illustrious personality. B.K.S. Iyengar. B.K.S. Iyengar is considered one of the foremost yoga gurus of the world. He is an author who has written on both the practice and the philosophy of yoga. He's authored many books like Light on Life, Light on Yoga, on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and so on. He was also one of the most widely accepted yoga teachers, so much so that in China, the China Post had issued a commemorative stamp in his honor because there were more than 30,000 students spread across many, many cities in China. So clearly someone with a lot of influence through his lifetime. But B.K. Iyengar did not have it easy, and certainly did not have an easy childhood by any stretch of imagination, because he was born in quite a poor family. He was the 11th of 13 children, and by the age of 9 he lost his father as well. And not only that, he was quite weak and sickly as a child. In his own words, he said that he had spindly limbs and protruding stomach, and he could barely hold his own head straight. It would just fall. He was that weak as a child. And things changed really when he met his guru. His guru was his own brother-in-law, Tirumalai Krishnamacharya. Tirumalai Krishnamacharya is considered as the father of modern yoga. He's one of the most illustrious yoga gurus, and B.K. Iyengar had the good fortune of learning from him. So here you see straight away Parjanya's blessings of becoming part of a parampara, a guru and a guru's parampara. So he had the blessings of that. However, Parjanya is also the one who tests your faith and tests your consistency in terms of your devotion to your guru and devotion to the knowledge that you seek. So when B.K. Iyengar sought to learn from Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, his guru, he didn't have it easy. In fact, Krishnamacharya, in the beginning, he said that this boy could never hope to learn yoga. And he was basically neglected. He was asked to do a lot of household chores and so on. So he was just in his guru's house and doing household chores and stuff like that. But much later, when Tirumalai Krishnamacharya's guru eventually had to part ways with his favorite pupil, then only he decided to teach B.K. Iyengar. And even then, when he taught him some very difficult asanas, yogic practices and yoga postures rather. So the way he would teach him very difficult yoga asanas, and then till he masters that particular asana, he would not give him food. So he would say, you first master that particular asana and only then you would get to eat. So it was not easy at all for B.K. Iyengar, but nevertheless he persisted. And later on, when he reflected back on those years, he said it was only for 2 years that his guru really taught him. And in those 2 years, what he taught really made him what he eventually became. So he did not have it easy. He had to struggle to get the love and blessings of his guru, but he persisted. And then he had the blessings of Parjanya through the knowledge that his guru shared with him eventually. There's another important Parjanya association. Parjanya's association is Vayu, or the movement of Vayu, and Prana. So Prana is the one that also associates with pranayama, what we call as the yogic techniques or the exercises of breathing that we do in order to gain prana and control the flow of prana in our bodies. So B.K. Iyengar would practice diligently for up to 3 hours, performing yogasanas even when he was 90 years of age. And after 3 hours of practice of these yogasanas, he would do 1 hour of practice of the pranayama. So it was that rigorous and disciplined in terms of his lifestyle. And when he was not consciously practicing pranayama, his body naturally would do non-deliberate pranayama because it became part of his system. So that kind of a body's natural rhythm and natural way of the pranayama practice being performed either consciously or not even in a very deliberate fashion gave him a very long life. He went on to live a life of 95 years. So you see the connection of Parjanya in terms of the control of Vayu, Prana, and hence longevity as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode of on Parjanya and also understanding of the Adityas. Thanks for joining me. I hope you will join me next week as well. Till then, take care.